Hello there. As you can see, different backdrop. I'm on the Greek island of Kos, and I'm recording from my balcony in my hotel room. Overlooking the sea, I can see islands beyond. It is absolutely beautiful. It's an absolute paradise here. I'm at one of the amateur chess organisation events, the World Amateur Championship, and I'm here coaching players and also giving lectures and simultaneous displays as well. It's great fun. It's a lovely atmosphere. It combines a holiday with a chess tournament, and yeah, I warmly recommend it. Next Stacia events are on Crete in October. So anyway, I've got time to squeeze in a quick recording in between my duties, and I've had a very interesting email from Tim in, let me see, he's in Cedar Rapids Chess Club in Iowa. And he's got a question about the Grand Prix Attack. Apparently there's someone at his chess club that plays this, and he's had a few problems against it. He bought my book, and I cover the Grand Prix Attack in that. But there's one line that I've neglected to mention, so I'm going to cover that here. Okay, so let's have a look. So e4, c5. Now the standard way of getting into the Grand Prix Attack is knight c3. And then f4, and then the bishop either goes to c4 or b5, and I cover that in the book. The reason that knight c3 is played before f4 is because black can strike out with d5 if knight c3 isn't played. And this is the line that Tim's slightly concerned about. Now, of course, I cover this in the book, and black has an excellent move here, d5, to break up those pawns. And I give three moves here. The main move is to take that pawn, and then here's the trick: you play knight f6. And once these pawns are split up, this is not very good for white. But what someone he's playing against often plays d3 against him, and this is a very rare move. And I didn't cover it in the book, but I'm happy to do so now. I have to say, my first reaction here is kind of to turn my nose up at this little pawn move. It looks a bit funny to me because, I mean, black can simply exchange queens here, and I just can't believe there's an issue with that. That would be my first thought about how to deal with it. Let's look at that, because we can exchange pawns in the middle, and then exchange queens. Well, we're not going to get checkmated very soon after that. And it seems to me that this must be fine for black, because white is going to have to take time to organise where the king is going to stand safely, because the queens might not be on the board, but all the other pieces are on the board, and that could still be very dangerous for white. And I think black can cause a bit of trouble here by attacking that pawn quickly. I mean, knight c6 is a good move. I mean, I think we should develop the knights first, as usual, so it's just common sense, really. But apart from knight c6, good move, I like knight f6. So I want to attack that e-pawn very quickly. And that just puts white under a bit of pressure. So, for example, a couple of moves, knight c3 or e5. If e5, then I'd like to hop into d5. And that knight, does a good job of looking at some squares here, stops the bishop coming out to e3. White still has to think, well, what do I do with the king? And this bishop now might come to f5, might come to g4 with tempo. And then, so what does white do here? Well, knight f3, knight c6, knight a3. I mean, you've got to get the knight out somewhere. I mean, you can't go to d2 because of knight e3 check. Bishop g4, well, already black has the initiative here. King moves f6. That's a key move in this position where white has played e5. If we can play f6, break down that pawn, and well, you can see that black is going to be ahead in development because that king is still wandering around in the middle of the board. Okay, so what about pawn to c4? What about pushing that knight away? Well, it's possible to go to b4. I think it's best to come to back to c7 actually. The problem with every pawn move is that it creates weaknesses behind it. So now, these squares on the d file are weakened. And, automatically I just feel that black should be fine here. Let's play knight c6. Bishop f5. Yeah, that's a nice move. So you can see that white has to be a little bit careful about the king. Doesn't have a natural home to go to. And knight e6, yeah, we're preparing to castle queenside. So you can see that knight is looking at two key points here. And, okay, the king moves to e1. I think it's got to move away from the open d file. Now, you could plonk a knight into d4 and castle queenside. That looks satisfactory to me. But listen, why not try and blow up the position? Undermine that pawn on e5 with g5. Something like this. This looks like a strange kind of Benko gambit. I think black has fantastic compensation here. The rook on the semi-open file. This e-pawn is weak. Probably going to castle queenside. And yeah, a knight coming in on d4 looks very inviting, or possibly b4 as well. So, full compensation there. So, okay, let's just come back. So that was pawn to e5. Okay, what about, let's say, knight c3? Seems very reasonable. Bring a knight out. Protects the pawn. The only problem is that that d4 square can't now be covered by a pawn. So knight c6 again, logical move. Let's just bring a knight out. Knight f3, well, we can pin that. Could be useful. And of course, black is preparing to castle queenside. Let's say bishop e3, castles queenside, check. The king has to move again. I mean, this feels absolutely fine for black. And now, okay, we have to bring these pieces into the game, the kingside pieces, but let's damage the pawns first and go g6. And that bishop is probably going to find a nice home on h6. And yeah, I'm prepared to give up that pawn because it's very clear that black is going to get excellent compensation. Probably going to recover this pawn. And positionally, that feels nice for black. White still has to solve the problem of where this king is going to end up. Those rooks are split. So it seems to me, let's go back. If black wants a pretty straightforward way to play, then simply exchanging on e4 and taking on, say, exchanging queens on d1 and hitting that e-pawn quickly. I think that's quite important actually, because it sets white some problems in the center while white's king is still floating around without a home to go to. So I think that's a very reasonable way for black to play. Objectively, I would say this endgame is about equal. But white has a few problems to solve. Okay, but let's come back here because, of course, there are many ways to play this position for black. I mean, it just feels that d3 is a bit passive to me. Knight c6 looks very decent if you prefer something else. And let's say, well, the most common move here actually is bishop e2. And I do cover bishop e2 in the book, actually on the second move, but this transposes. I actually recommend another line. Let me just show that actually. So in the book, I look at bishop e2 on the second move, And of course it could transpose if black goes d5. But actually what I recommend is knight f6, rapid development. And I'm not worried about white's kingside attack, because after queen e1, I think black strikes out with d5 and is absolutely fine. But anyway, that's all in the book. Of course, this is similar. And as I said, bishop e2 is the most common move here, because it means that after the exchange of queens, white can recapture the bishop, which isn't as troublesome than recapturing with the king. Nevertheless, I feel that black is absolutely fine here, as is standard against many anti-Sicilian variations. The Fianchetto is a very good idea. This bishop looks wonderful on the long diagonal. So bishop g7. And yes, c3 is a normal move here. I mean, the d4 square has to be covered really at some point. So bishop here, knight f3. And at this point, I mean, there are, again, lots of different setups that black can play. I mean, I think knight f6 or e6 actually is super solid, and play knight e7. I think that's very reasonable. And then either b6 or b5, and then the queen's bishop comes out. But again, I quite like this endgame. Even though white is recapturing the bishop, again, if black develops very rapidly, I feel that puts white under a bit of pressure, because you can see that these pieces have yet to enter the game, whereas black's development is just far easier. So again, there's a choice between e5 and protecting the pawn, let's say with bishop c2. So, okay, we'll play e5. Let's try this. Knight here. Well, this knight is quite menacing, so usually white attacks this. And bishop e6. I mean, I think this position is about equal, really. I think white's best is to exchange and play like this. And I don't think there's much drama in this position, really. I can see there'll be lots of exchanges on the d file. And I think this actually happened in one game. White exchanged rooks here, and yeah, the game was agreed drawn at some point. You can see that this move f6 can be very important for black. Break down that pawn on e5, and that gives the king some room. So I think e5 is very comfortable. If bishop c2, castle kingside, why not? We still have to develop normally. And b6. So I like that move because the bishop now has options. It might come to b7 to put a bit of pressure on that e pawn, or it might come to a6, and that slices down that diagonal. It could be rather annoying, and also the d3 square is a little bit weak. Let me just show you one particular game that went like this. White's got in a bit of a tangle with his pieces. Very, very straightforward development. Yeah, this queen's bishop is a problem because, okay, it's come out to e3, but it gets hit straight away. And already black with the two bishops has a really clear advantage here. Bishop h6 is perhaps the strongest move, but a5 was played, and this is a lovely initiative. It's also really, really strong, and yeah, with a3 you can see that bishop entered the game, and clear advantage to black. And if I'm just going to suggest one more thing, I'm just going to come right back to this position. So after c3, I was looking at bishop g7, and that's what we just looked at. But actually, it's possible to exchange straight away and then play knight f6. So as usual, putting pressure on that e-pawn. And the difference is it could be useful to have the option to play bishop h6, in fact, in this position, because e5 could be a very useful move, actually. And it means if white plays e5, then after knight d5, there's immediate pressure on that f4 pawn. And let's say let's say e5, bishop e6, and yeah, f6 straight away to break down that pawn on e5. And it just feels to me as though black has a much easier time of it than white. So, Tim in Iowa, I hope that helps you. Basically, just to sum up, I think the end game in both cases here is very, very comfortable for black, either immediately or a little bit later. And a key idea in both these variations, both these endgames, is to hit that pawn on e4 quite quickly, because I think that causes white most problems. It challenges white, basically. So there you go. Tim, I hope that helps. Just a reminder, everyone, if you want a good repertoire for black against the anti-Sicilians, you can get the book or the Chessable course. Thanks for watching.